In 1918, as the First World War entered its final year, great changes were occurring throughout society. One of the most significant was women's struggle to achieve equality with men, and especially the right to vote. It had been a long campaign. In the early 1870s, Isabella Todd formed the North of Ireland Women's Suffrage Society, the first suffrage group in Ireland. The Belfast-based Todd spoke at large meetings to demand a better deal for women and, with her friend Margaret Byers, campaigned for girls' education at secondary and university level. Thomas and Anna Haslam later founded the first suffrage group in Dublin that would go on to become the Irish Women's Suffrage and Local Government Association. For decades, they campaigned for women to be given the vote in local and parliamentary elections. Because of Isabella Todd, Belfast agreed to allow women to elect members to the City Corporation in 1887, long before the Local Government Act of 1898. Initially, the suffragists campaigning for the right to vote in parliamentary elections, like Millicent Fawcett's National Union of Women's Suffrage Societies, chose legal methods such as petitions, meetings, and letter writing to advance their cause. But progress was slow, and in 1903, a more militant movement of women, known as suffragettes, emerged under the leadership of Emmeline Pankhurst. She and her daughters formed the Women's Social and Political Union and oversaw more direct tactics such as mass meetings, heckling politicians, damaging public property, and chaining themselves to barriers at public places like Downing Street. The militant movement soon spread to Ireland, where Hannah Sheehy Skeffington and Margaret Cousins set up the Irish Women's Franchise League in 1908, campaigning for home rule for Irish women as well as Irish men. There were also 20 small non-militant suffrage groups around Ulster. The group Todd formed, now known as the Irish Women's Suffrage Society, had unionist, nationalist and Labour women and held open-air meetings and poster parades. 2 of their members served prison sentences in Holloway Jail in London after joining the window-smashing campaign of the WSPU. 18 Irish women were imprisoned in Holloway for suffrage activities. When the Irish Parliamentary Party refused to include votes for women in the Third Home Rule Bill of 1912, the IWFL decided the time for militancy in Ireland had arrived. On June the 13th, members attacked the windows of Dublin Castle, the GPO and the Custom House, and all were arrested and sent to Mountjoy Jail. In November 1912, the windows of the GPO in Belfast were smashed, telephone wires cut, and letters in pillar boxes destroyed. No one was arrested. At the end of 1913, the WSPU set up an Ulster Centre in Belfast, and members of the IWSS joined. They attacked buildings connected with the Ulster Unionists and places of male recreation, like golf courses, and the Abbeylands Mansion, where members of the UVF were training. They hoped to persuade Unionists to give women the vote if Ulster opted out of Home Rule. In July 1914, in one of the most famous attacks, Lillian Metke, a founding member of the Lisburn Suffrage Society, attempted to blow up Lisburn Cathedral, along with 3 other women. 7 suffragettes were imprisoned in Crumlin Road Jail, and there were 36 arrests for suffrage activity throughout Ireland. When the First World War was declared, many suffragettes ended their campaign, turning attentions to the war effort. Lady Londonderry's Women's Legion, for instance, showed for the first time that women were the equal to men in roles from driver to engineer and farm worker. In Ireland, however, many suffragettes, like Sheehy Skeffington, campaigned against the war and continued their fight for women's rights, such as equal pay for equal work and equal marriage laws. She and other female Republicans, like Winifred Carney and Countess Constance Markievicz, believed in the promise of the proclamation of the Irish Republic and took part in the Easter Rising of 1916. When victory came in the battle for the vote, it was qualified because politicians were afraid women would be in the majority as voters. The Representation of the People Act in February 1918 extended voting rights to women over the age of 30 who were property owners, married to property owners, or living in rental property worth more than £5. This meant that many young women who had taken part in war work still could not vote. All men aged 21 and over could vote without any property qualification. Women now formed 43% of the electorate. In November, a Qualification of Women Act also allowed women over 21 to stand for election. 17 women in Britain stood in the 1918 general election. None were successful. In Ireland, Sinn Féin put up 2 women candidates. In East Belfast, Winfred Carney, who worked for the Irish Textile Workers Union and who had served in the GPO during the Easter Rising, was unsuccessful. Countess Markievicz in Dublin became the first woman ever elected to the House of Commons. As a Sinn Féin member, she did not take her seat, but was made Minister for Labour in the first Dáil when released from prison in March 1919. In Ireland, voting rights were extended to all women over the age of 21 by the Free State Constitution drawn up in 1922. In Britain, full voting rights were extended to women aged over 21 by the Equal Franchise Act introduced in 1928. It had been a remarkable achievement, but much work was left for women in Ireland. Not long before her death in 1946, Sheehy Skeffington expressed her disillusionment with the Irish Republic's treatment of women. The fight goes on today.